The International Rules of the Historical Medieval Battle. Chapter 1, General Regulations. 1.1 Historical Medieval Battles, HMB, are full contact sporting battles, where historical protective and offensive arms of the Middle Ages, specially made and adjusted to this kind of competition, are used. HMBs are held on the list of a standardized size and shape, with different types of authentic weapons depending on the kind of battle. 1.1.1 The concept of HMB includes all kinds of full contact power fight, namely historical fencing, buhurts, melee, duels, small group battles, mass field battles, professional fights, etc., where items of historical reenactment of the Middle Ages, HRMA, are used. 1.1.2 HMBs are always held in full contact, but are represented by different categories, with various authorized and prohibited techniques. In addition, victory conditions, battle regulations, tournament schemes, and other parameters are different. 1.2 All HMBs are held under the control and observation of a marshal's, referees group, including one knight marshal, main referee, field referees, linesmen, and referees on video monitoring. The number of members of the marshal's group is set separately for every event, depending on its format and content. The presence of the knight marshal and field referees is always obligatory. 1.2.1 The knight marshal is chosen by the organizers of the event. In any case of a disagreement, the knight marshal has the final decision authority. 1.2.2 The records of the combat process and combat results are made by the Secretariat. 1.3 To get admission to the HMB, a fighter has to 1.3.1 Be of age in terms of the law of his country, as well as the country hosting the event. 1.3.2 Sign a statement of voluntary participation in full contact battles. In the statement, a fighter confirms his acceptance of any risks associated with participation in the battles, declines any claims, and assures he is familiar with the rules and agrees to follow them strictly. 1.3.3 Have a health certificate issued by a specialized medical institution confirming that he has no contraindications to participation in the competitions. 1.3.4 Be accredited by the organizers of a specific event. 1.3.5 Have an admission for protective and offensive arms provided by the technical and historical committees. 1.4 Only those offensive and protective weapons which have analogues of a certain historical epoch confirmed by scientific research are allowed in the HMB. 1.5 A fighter needs to rebate his weapons before the participation in an event and bring them into conformity with the specifications stated in this regulatory document. Rebating is rounding of peak and percussion edges of any bladed or pole weapon used in the HMB competitions. The radius of rebating is about 10 millimeters. Note, it should match the radius of a coin, 20 millimeters in diameter. 1.5.1 The edges of all the striking parts of any weapon are to be rounded as a bevel and be not less than 2 millimeters wide, including any possible chips and notches. 1.5.2 The edges of shields are to be trimmed with thick, not less than 2 to 4 millimeters, leather or fabric put in 3 or more layers joined with glue. Important: all wooden, wicker, or leather shields should be made only on the basis of reliable historical analogues and correspond to the form of the analog in all 3 planes. A shield can only be used with a set of armor of the same epoch and region. 1.5.3 Edges of the iron shields have to be carefully forge-rolled and be a minimum of 4 millimeters thick. Important: steel shields of only rounded shapes, made on the basis of reliable historical analogues, corresponding to the form of the analog in all 3 planes, are allowed. A shield can only be used with a set of armor of the same epoch and region. The weight of any steel shield shall not exceed 5 kilograms. 1.6. All responsibility for the quality, safety, and reliability of the elements of protective arms is on a fighter who uses them. 1.7. Below you will find a list of permitted weapons as well as technical requirements for them. Important: the maximum weight of all weapons fully assembled and ready for battle is given. The permissible upward error is plus 100 for single-handed, plus 300 grams for two-handed models of arms. 1.7.1 Bladed weapons. Single-handed swords, sabers, broadswords, up to 1600 grams. Falchions, up to 1800 grams. Long swords, total length is up to 1400 millimeters. Swords, sabers, broadswords, up to 2500 grams. Two-handed bladed weapons of the 14th to 17th centuries, up to 3500 grams. 1.7.2 Pole arms. Single-handed, axes, up to 1300 grams. Maces and six-flanked maces, up to 1000 grams. Important: the length of a cutting part of an axe blade is to be not less than 7 centimeters. Important: all the maces and six-flanked maces should have only wooden handles and no sharp edges. 1.5-handed axes, pole axes, and other similar weapons with a total length of not less than 1 meter, up to 2300 grams. Two-handed halberds, glaives, pole axes, and similar kinds of weapon with a total length of more than 1400 millimeters, up to 3000 grams. Important: heavier weapons or only thrust weapons are not admitted for use in historical medieval battles. 1.8 The approved protective arms for HMB competitions must be a restoration of medieval armor. The restoration must have the exact proportions and general appearance of historical analog, and correspond to such characteristics. Compliance with scientifically proved originals of the 13th to 17th centuries. Authenticity of used materials, steel, leather, fabric, cotton waste, batting, felt. Availability of configuration that completely covers the vital organs and joints of the fighter. Good condition. Thickness of protective material should meet the requirements stated below. Size and proportions of all the protective elements should meet the requirements. Aesthetic appearance. 1.9 All items of protective arms have to meet the technical and aesthetic requirements and represent a complete set of one time period. Important: only in rare cases, due to a lack of information concerning the material culture of certain periods and regions, stylized armor elements are allowed. In this situation, a fighter can replace these elements with the authentic elements relating to the neighboring regions and periods, but only if everything looks aesthetically and proportionally. Concepts that require further interpretation and explanation. 1. Authentic: a material or object that corresponds to a certain historical origin found during the research. The use of authentic materials and items coming from the original is approved by the community of historical reenactors of the Middle Ages. 2. Stylized item is an object that has no specific historical analogs, but made in compliance with the general style of armor, its proportional, aesthetic, and operational characteristic. 3. Scientifically proved original is text and visual material, pictures, sculptures, and other documented archaeological sources or their combination, on the basis of which a belonging of a particular object to the group of authentic ones is determined. 1.9.1 The fighter's head is to be protected with a metal helmet, safety features, and specifications of which comply with the same parameters of a helmet made of plain steel 2 millimeters thick. 1.9.2 The fighter's helmet is to be equipped either with a well-quilted padded cap or leather suspension, a parachute with a quilted padded cap. The thickness of these elements is not less than 10 millimeters in a condensed form. 1.9.3. The fighter's helmet must have a genial strap, which does not allow it to fall down from the fighter's head. 1.9.4. The fighter's body, arms, and hands are to be covered with lamellar armor. The chainmail can be only used as an extra protection in addition to lamellal armor or the linking elements in lamellal armor. 1.9.5. In addition to armor, the fighter's body is to be protected with under armor padding, which covers the entire torso. A layer of linen and cloth sewn together is the minimum acceptable under armor protection. 1.9.6. The back of the neck and base of the skull have to be protected with steel lamellar armor element, supplemented with damping quilted or padded protection, such as a pelerine of the padded cap, a special collar, or a filling. A riveted chainmail element with the lamellar protection and a protective damping layer located under it is allowed. (1.9.7) The spine and tailbone should have steel lamellar protection with quilted or padded protection not less than 10 millimeters thick in a condensed form. 1.9.8. The fighter's hands are to be protected with gloves or mittens made of steel plates or riveted chainmail. If the hand's protection is made of riveted chainmail only, a damping layer not less than 5 millimeters thick in a condensed form has to be under it. 1.9.9. Hands and forearms of a fighter using a shield with the elbow grip can be protected with steel armor elements. Then, if a fighter loses the shield, he'll be able to continue the fight. They can be protected minimally, only with under armor padding and cloth gloves, but from all the sides, which may be under attack. The minimum level of under armor protection includes a layer of woolen and linen cloth sewn together. The fighter's elbows and knees must have a steel lamellar protection. If the lamellar protection doesn't fit the fighter's armor, it should be hidden under the authentic element of the set. The minimum level of under armor protection includes a quilted or padded protective layer not less than 10 millimeters thick in a condensed form. 1.9.11. The fighter's shins and thighs are to be protected with steel armor elements at every side. 1.9.12. The fighter's groin is to be protected with armor elements or hidden protection, an athletic supporter for contact sports. 1.9.13. The protective complex has to provide a complete and reliable protection to the head, neck, spine, and joints in any fighting position. 1.9.14. In the case of a fighter who represents a time period when certain parts of the body weren't covered with protective elements, these zones are to be safely covered with hidden protective elements, Eurasia region of the 13th to 17th centuries, which aren't registered visually. 1.9.15. If the level of safety of the authentic protective arms does not meet requirements of these regulations, a fighter should use extra protection made of any kind of authentic materials, worn only under authentic armor and under armor. Important: a modern protection, having its own fastener system, can be used only as the third protective level. 1.9.16. The fighter needs to be sure of his armor protective characteristics and check the accuracy and safety of any defensive parts before a battle. 1.9.17. The fighter is responsible for the offensive and protective arms he uses in battle and for monitoring their authenticity, aesthetics, and compliance with the requirements stated in this regulatory document. Important: The fighter uses and battles only those weapons that are authorized by the technical and historical committees.